Commissioner Cummings made regarding
We are recording.
she did. That's fine.
And I've also heard from the county attorney.
Yeah.
So
Very good. All right. Because Chastity, who I think the world up, I was like, I sat there, I watched I was like, what do you? She represented that you had already opined on it, and I was like, this is not right.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for the Children's Services Council of Leon Executive Committee meeting. Today's date is Tuesday, December 5th, and the time is now 5:01 p.m. and I am going to call the meeting to order. Ms. Clay, will you please take a roll call for us?
Mr. Mitchell,
Here.
Mr. Watts,
Here.
Dr. Glenn.
Here.
Have a-
We have a quorum. All right. Thank you very much. So it is now time for us to approve the agenda. So you all have received a copy of the agenda in advance and you should have a hard copy. Do I hear a motion to approve the
Madam
agenda?
Chair, I'll move the agenda.
All right. I have a motion from
Second.
Mitchell. All right. And a second from Mr. Watts. Thank you. So without any opposition, the agenda is now approved. It is now time for public comment. I don't see anybody in the audience, but Ms. Clay, do we have any comments that need to be read?
There's no public comment.
No public comments. All right. So with that, the reason for this meeting is for us to review the evaluation, the performance evaluation of our executive director. Mr. Rowe has been nice enough to capture the evaluation results from all of the council members. I'm going to ask you to please provide a summary and then we will move forward with the agenda.
thank you, Madam Chair. The executive director's employment contract provides that each year the council members will evaluate her performance using an instrument that's reflective of her job description. That instrument is the same as what's used last year's cycle, and it was provided to each council member. Each council member returned their scoring and their comments to me. I've summarized them and provided them to each committee member. The committee is not required to meet formally to consider the results. However, the results do have to be presented to the full governing council, which will occur at the December 21st scheduled meeting. It may be at that time that there is additional discussion concerning the evaluations and namely compensation. The contract does not require that the executive director receive any sort of a raise or increase in her compensation due to the performance evaluations. However, it does allow for that. So to the extent that there is discussion among council members or an ask for a recommendation by the executive committee regarding perhaps a salary increase, it'd be helpful for the executive committee to have met and discuss the results and in particular that aspect before it's presented to the full governing council again on December 21st.
Okay.
So what you have in your packets is the summary of the numerical scoring, as well as the narrative comments that are given by council members, and also for your convenience, I included the same scoring summary from 2022, so that you can see how our scores compare to the prior year's evaluation process. The board at the time, of course, was comprised of 2 additional members. Those additional members have 2 members have resigned from the board, so we're down to 8. The scores reflect scoring by all 8 council members currently serving. I'm answering questions.
Okay, thank you very much for providing that summary. We're now open for a conversation or discussion. I do think all of you had an opportunity to review these. Thank you so much for capturing them and providing the summarization of the notes. What I would like for us to do is just basically come up with a recommendation that we want to take forward to the council on December the 21st. At this point, I would just like for us to present the results and let everybody know. Let me just open it up for discussion and then I will add any additional comments to what's being said.
Mr. Schwartz, can I go first?
Yes, please.
Thank you. So, Madam Chair, I just want to make sure that the process that we set up last year, which I thought was really good, is that everyone is going to provide input.
Correct.
And then you are going to sit down with the executive director, go through and sort of do a one-on-one evaluation.
I meant to review that. I do plan to be here on Thursday.
Okay.
At the conclusion of this meeting. I want to make sure that she is aware of the results.
Right.
And then we will present our recommendation to the full council on the 21st.
But again, just procedurally,
Sure.
so we meet, and then you meet with her and you
Correct.
go through and she has an opportunity to review any of the comments that have been made and offer. I think that process sort of lends itself if there's a, less than adequate
Yeah.
evaluation that's being performed, which there isn't. And then it goes to the full board. And so I've looked at these. I'm very comfortable with Sika's performance. I'm as comfortable as I was last year. I'm also comfortable with taking the approach that you sit down and go through, see if she has any problems, and we bring it to the full board. And last year, I remember the conversation came up, are we recommending, a pay increase? And we ended up just saying no recommendation. It's just, we've got 8 board members, you guys vote. And I would be supportive of that as well. I'm anxious to hear your comments. So I know you like to go last, which I appreciate, but I'm anxious to hear your comments. My hunch is I won't offer anything additionally,
Okay.
but I just want to leave a little window open for.
Absolutely. I definitely want to comment, and I do have my comments prepared. I do want to hear what Terrence wants to say, and then we can come back to you, Mr. Mitchell.
Well, thank you for that. And unfortunately, I do have to hop off right at 5:30. My apologies. But I don't have any questions about the evaluation. I absolutely support Dr. Glenn meeting with her. And I do think it would be fair, let's say that if there were certain ratings and she wanted to know more details around how to maybe improve that, I don't think that's unfair, but I just wanted to put that to you, Dr. Glenn, that if that conversation came up, I think that's fair to present. So I don't know what that would look like as far as if you had to get with another council member to provide a detail, but I guess you have to cross that hurdle if it gets there. But to the raise point, am I not mistaken that we changed that contract language during the last go round, that it's not an automatic anymore, that am I correct about that?
It's my understanding that it's not automatic. That will be based on any recommendations that we make. And
Gotcha.
so if we wanted to consider it, then that would be something that we would have to make a recommendation to bring forward to the full council to vote on.
Perfect. I think the last time was almost like you really didn't per se have a choice. I know you still was able to vote. I can tell you right now that my position would be, I would not be in favor of a raise. It's not anything towards Ms. Green's, performance or whatnot. But I think that it's a fair salary currently where it is, and considering the last raise that we gave her, which also I think included a cost of living. So that's where I would be. Not to say that in the future I would not, be in favor of one, but that's just my position right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Anything else you wanted to add to that? You're good?
I'm good. Thank you.
All right. So back to my thoughts. I agree with you, Terrence. I do think that Ms. Green did a wonderful job this year. I really appreciated the planning session, the strategy session that we had. I felt as if that did work to kind of refocus us. But I think that given where she landed last year, with the raise, with the cost of living increase, because I think she got both. She got the raise and the cost of living increase. I do think she's at a good, comfortable spot. And my recommendation is that we keep her where she is right now, and then do another evaluation at the end of next year, where we may consider it next year based on her performance next year. But my recommendation is that we don't move her. I would like to present it, give her the opportunity to kind of comment, ask any questions. If she goes through and says, she doesn't understand why this person does that, I want to present that opportunity for her to get further information. But I think she's going to be comfortable with this. I mean, I can't speak for her, but I do think that she would be. But in the event that she does, I want to give her that opportunity. So what I was hoping to do, and I understand your position, is to just let the council vote. I was prepared for us to make a recommendation that we share it hopefully share her feedback. But our recommendation is that we keep her right where she is and then let the council vote on that. And that's what I was prepared to present for us today.
So I'm glad that I left a little opening because I completely agree with both of you. That she's fairly compensated. The only thing that I would add, and I really think it's a good idea to have the one-on-one and you be able to review it. It's just, but one thing I find of all the boards that I sit on, in addition to the chair doing her annual evaluation, and it is a very healthy thing for the executive director to sit down one-on-one with each of the board members, even if it's just to go to lunch with them once a year to say, how am I doing? Paul, I noticed that you gave me a 3 on financial last year, you gave me a 3 on financial this year. Tell me how I can make that a 4. Tell me what I can do. And I just use that, I'll use myself as the example. I think that makes it more fair too. We just so happen to have a very competent executive director. But in the event that we don't have one, getting in a practice where the executive director is once a year sitting down with the board members and just asking them, what can I do better? What would make it easier for you as a board member? I think is a good thing. So that's in your evaluation, one-on-one with her, I would encourage you to.
Absolutely. And she did do that last year. I know for a fact that she met with me, and I thought she met with everybody because I know there were other people that she was telling me she still had to meet with. So it was my understanding that she did meet with everybody individually, but I will definitely make that formal recommendation that she continue to do that.
I did with her, but
Okay.
maybe we talked so much that it
She
was
just
like.
said that, yeah,
we're
okay,
fine.
all right, sounds good, but I will definitely make sure that's a part of the recommendation. Okay, so I guess what we need to decide right now is, and I'm happy.
All of the evaluations with the chair presenting to the full board, the fact that she and the executive director have met and there are no comments or there are some comments, and a recommendation that we leave the compensation package as it is.
All right, so the motion on the floor right now is that we review this and the compensation package stays the same. Do I hear a second for that
Second.
recommendation?
Second.
You good? Okay, all right, so the motion has been seconded. So Ms. Clay, let's just do a quick roll call vote, please, on this motion.
Mr. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. White,
Yes. Do you have to officially say public comment?
Do we have public comment?
we do not have.
We have no public comment. Thank you for that, Mr. Watts. All right.
I
Mr.
just putting on
White,
my, yes.
and Dr. Glenn.
Yes,
Okay.
all right, so that motion has passed. I know. That's the recommendation that we will do, Mr. Rowe. So that's what we're gonna do on the December 21st meeting.
2 very brief follow-up points, if I may.
Yes.
When you, Madam Chair, meet with CEPA to discuss the results, if she has a concern about scoring by another council member,
Yes.
then it's incumbent upon CEPA to discuss that with the council member and not ask you to essentially go as a.
Absolutely.
Because you are prohibited from doing so.
Absolutely. Okay.
I'm glad to facilitate that because
Good.
I'm not subject to
Thank you.
some
All right,
assumptions.
perfect.
The other thing I wanted to mention is CEPA's contract is a 2-year contract.
Yes.
It will basically lapse at the end of 2024.
Okay.
So in addition to considering a potential raise at the time, we'll bring forth a revised new contract for
End of next
presumably
year.
another 2 years.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for reminding us of that.
But at the end of next year.
Yes.
For 2024.
Right.
Yeah, and it's 2024. All right. Perfect. All right. So we have a recommendation, a formal recommendation from the executive committee that we're going to bring forward for the meeting on the 21st. I will meet with Ms. Green this week. If she does want to have some conversations or discussions, I will ask her to allow you to do that. And I'll make the formal recommendation that she meets officially with every one of the council members. All right, wonderful. Thank you very much. All right, any other discussions on this particular agenda item? All right, let's move forward. So the next agenda item is our next meeting date. When would that be, Ms. Clay?
So right now, we don't have a next meeting date.
Okay.
After you all officially
Okay.
adopt in the next general council meeting, then we'll move forward with the subcommittee meetings,
Okay.
meeting on that quarterly basis.
Perfect.
And Ms. Clay, that is going to be when we act as the is it, are we a new committee? What the bylaws, when?
So the bylaws committee has been resolved.
So it's all part of the executive committee. It would just be an agenda item on the executive committee if we're going to look at the bylaws.
Correct.
Got it.
Dissolve the bylaws committee, so that's where we landed on that, and we'll make that official at the currently, we don't have a next meeting agenda. So now we are now open for committee member comments. Do we have any comments from either Mr. Watts or Mr. Mitchell?
Go ahead, Mr. Watts.
No, go ahead.
So, and I don't know that this is a conversation for the full council or the executive committee, but I'll share with you all that one, I'm sitting down with our outside accountant as well as Ms. Snyder to go through our budget. I want to go through the budget because a few issues had popped up from the outside world looking at us. And I really want to make sure that we are firm in our understanding of where we are financially. And we're fine, is the short answer, but I mean down to the specific penny. And also the full council at some point is going to have to consider noise from the outside. Now, we are obligated to do nothing other than what is brought before us.
Right.
There is talk that the county and the city may dissolve their financial responsibility for certain programs that involve children and families. I don't know that that's such a good idea, but that's a decision elected officials get to make. And if they choose to make that, it ends that. And then we as a council would have the ability to consider, because funding is not available. So we would then have the opportunity to consider whether or not we wanted to fund any of those programs that have been eliminated. I think that the council really needs, we put on the consent agenda every meeting, the financial report. And I go through it and I review it, and I appreciate the fact that people are comfortable with my review. I am not comfortable with where we are if we're going to assume more responsibility without the full council understanding that for every decision you make to fund something, you are making a decision not to fund something else. And on a going forward basis, they may need to think about what things that are in that pot right now that we might want to fund in the future.
And so thank you for bringing that up. And I do think that depending on what the county commissioners decide, I do think that's a discussion, like not necessarily a work group, but an agenda item that we really sit down and think through. How does that impact our work? How does that impact our accountability to services and programs within the community? Because, I'm all focused on our priority areas, but then there may be other things that are added to that list. So I do think that depending on where they sit, I may ask Ms. Green and the staff, give us a presentation, let's dedicate some real thought into that. And then how do we incorporate that into the scope of work that we're doing? So thank you for bringing that forward, but I agree with you. We need to be deliberate.
And as you're deliberating, it will be nice to know, no question, this is the amount of money we have, or not allocated. And I know that, that SECA is putting an agenda item, just an overall agenda item on how an agenda item on this December 21st meeting talking about this, because it's the county, but the city has to also. They're part of the mix as well. Anyhow, I just want to let you know that one, this meeting is coming up. I'm trying to get it done next week prior to the board meeting so that this time I will pull the budget and do a very quick overview of it again, so people then begin, to start budgeting. I mean, if you feel like, oh, we got plenty of money and we don't, it's important to know, or you think we don't have money and we do, I think it's important to know.
Okay. All right. Thank you for bringing that forward.
Madam Chair, may I
Please.
briefly follow up on that? So certain federal grant programs make funding available, grant funding available to state and local government community providers. And those programs are often subject to what is known in sort of shorthand as supplement, not supplant requirements.
Okay.
And basically what that means is that the federal government imposes a requirement that the money we are providing to state or local providers can't be used to supplant monies already available to those providers, but has to supplement their budgets. Previously, a council member asked me what I thought of that requirement as it applies to Children's Services Council. There is a provision in the statute governing Children's Services Councils, which is 125.901. It's worded a little bit differently, but the intent appears to be the same. It says that monies made available by the Children's Services Council cannot be used as a substitute for the monies already available to, in the context of the council members ask, the funding that's available to the community service providers. In other words, if a nonprofit comes and asks CSC for money and we award, that nonprofit can't use that money to do anything other than augment and provide more or better services than what it's doing. Can't use it, for instance, to give raises to all employees and not support children. So I prepared a short memo to that effect, again, in the context of the money granted by CSC to nonprofits in the community. Basically saying that, that appears to be what the legislature intended, comparable to the federal supplant prohibition. And the way that we go about making sure that doesn't happen is by placing requirements on those who apply for funding that, hey, you have to be aware of this requirement. It's my understanding that when the county met recently to discuss possibly no longer funding children's programs or some children's programs, that there was some discussion at that meeting, which I did not attend, of the memo I had provided on this point, which was, again, in a little bit different context. It was the money that CSC gives to its providers as opposed to the monies county make available. So maybe even that memo of mine was discussed and cited. I have since been asked to revisit it and kind of address this particular point. What impact, if any, does it have on CSC funding if the county or the city determines to eliminate funding for programs? My general thought is no impact. I mean, we don't have any ability to compel the city or the county to continue funding. That's entirely their province. If they withdraw the funding, we are not obligated to further fund. But I will look at it closely and be prepared to discuss it at some length during the full governing council meeting.
Thank you. Because I just want to make sure if we determine as a council that any programs that were defunded that we think should continue, do we have within our authority the ability to say, we think these services were important enough that we want to continue to fund those without any issues? So
subject to, please.
I wanted to share, I was asked as staff to prepare an analysis that compared all 31 programs that are contained in the 5 categories that are being proposed for reduction of categories, and to kind of cross compare them. Of the 31 programs, 13 are already being funded by us for the exact same reasons that they're being funded and by other sources. We were just expanding their capability, their capacity. In addition, we then cross-referenced all of the programs that are being funded in the categories in which they fall and how that might align with our theory of change and our impact area. So that work was just completed, and you will, as all the council members will be receiving that from Director Green, so that you understand that analysis that we were asked to do in response to some of the concerns from the public that have popped up. So Director Green will be sharing that with all council members in advance of the meeting. There is an agenda item, as Mr. Mitchell mentioned, there is an agenda item for the December 21st meeting, but it's not just a broad overview. We've actually invited Assistant County Manager or Administrator, I believe his title is, Mr. Shinkton Lammy, who is over the Community Human Services Partnership, to talk about why they're proposing it, what they're like, where they're at in the process. And then to give an opportunity to the entire council to have this just discussion about the staff level conversations that have happened internally at the county, and how that transpired with the CSC. Again, there's been no promises made. There's been no expectations conveyed, other than to basically to General Counsel Rowe's comments. That's what's been shared. That you choose what you do, and we were asked to provide that former memo. It was a public records request that came in, so we provided it, that this was distributed upon request of a council member. So that's where that came from. So I can ask Director Green to include that original memo, which might have been shared with the full council at some point previously. But so to include that in the email, that includes the analysis for.
Madam Chair, and I've watched almost all. I haven't gotten to the very end, and it's because we have a county commissioner who's also a board member. You want to be very careful, because she's my county commissioner.
Yeah.
As a voter in this county, she's my county commissioner. So I have some opinions. It was represented by the assistant county, whatever his name is, that we as a council had opined on this and were supportive of it. I looked, I was like, I know it didn't. Well, one, I've not missed a meeting.
Right.
So I didn't sleep for a part of it. I'm very attentive. So I know we did not opine on it or take a position on it as a council. And so I'm anxious for him to come in and talk about this. But again, we are not able to, let's say they are funding, buying a 12-pack of Nixies. If they continue to buy the 12-pack of Nixies, we can't buy that.
Right.
But if they say they would have to make a determination, and it's about $400,000, we are not funding those $400,000 worth of Nixies.
Right.
At that point, once they voted on it and the funding's no longer available,
We can decide.
the Nixie needers could come in and say, oh, we need that 12-pack of Nixies. And we could decide whether or not we thought it was worthy of consideration, which is why I thought it'll be nice to know how much we have in the bank to fund these sorts of things. And by the way, the county is just $400,000. The city is considerably more.
Correct. And we can provide included in the analysis. We actually pulled every single program, how much the city is providing, how much the county is providing for all 5 of the categories. It's actually 568 or 568, but it doesn't. That includes the promise zone category, right. And that's the difference. So we were told the 5 categories, and so that's why we wanted to prepare that analysis. So we'll include. So we're very clear on the programs that are currently funded. But I also wanted to say that you use the term defunded. And I think that that's complicated because it is a competitive process, and there all of these programs, there's no guarantee that they would have continued funding, but we have requested from the county or from CHSP how many of those are currently funded have historically been funded over the years. I know, for an example, there is one that I'm not going to say since the inception of CHSP, but pretty darn close to every year they are awarded funding, and they are also currently receiving funding from us. So there's a handful of those that look like that. So we have the preliminary analysis and we'll continue to dig a little bit deeper so that all of the questions as you're discussing, we'll have available for you.
Thank you. I would appreciate that. And if you all can, if you have access to it, include impact data, because that means a lot to me. I mean, I need to know.
It's so consistent.
Yeah, I'm serious. I need the data to know, is this worth it? And what's going away if we, so, all right.
And I will say, and part of this is with CHSP, I don't want to speak out of turn. We can ask Mr. Lammy to bring that. The issue is that historically, the CHSP process does not look at things the way that we have set them up.
You're kind of like this.
There has not historically been any proof that these programs are having impact, save how many children are you reaching and maybe how many events you hosted. No, there are none. And they are working towards it. They have historically, in this last 2 years, they have been working toward that, but there's not any consistency. Certainly part of our process and one of the very early on conversations that we had here within CSC Leon, which may even predate our director, was did we want to have a similar process to CHSP? And it was an unequivocal no from the council. The process that we're putting forward, the standards that we're holding them to, and not just their fiscal standards. I would say that what we did the first summer is comparable to what CHSP does. And you know how you feel about that. And I could venture to say that we might have even more data from our summer process.
Wow. Okay.
But it's because, they are working toward it. I don't want to leave any opinion that this is not money that's been well spent. They are absolutely working toward that and finding those common metrics. It's just a different approach of introducing that halfway through a complicated process.
Just one final thing, Madam Chair, just to share with you and Mr. Watts, again, the fewer cooks that are in the kitchen, sometimes the better. And in this case, I think that's the case. One potential proposal that has been discussed is they also have a 2-year funding process, right? So they need to make their decision quickly because this 2-year funding program, a funding cycle may be, if they're not going to fund it, they need to know. If everyone wanted to shift, and again, this is why the financial component is so important, and you took a 2-year runway and you said, county and city or CHSP, we appreciate the fact that you recognize that the Children's Services Council is doing a good job of setting up metrics and criteria by which we can grade and measure the programs that we're funding. And if you want in the 2 years, or as you're starting to wind down funding, because that's really what this is about, is they don't have money for homeless shelters. There's a lot of things, but they have a significant deficit as it relates to the homeless crisis. So if you're going to do that and you want to give the CSC 2 years to sort of on-ramp programs that are currently being operated with your funds, but you want us to start grading them so that we're ready for the next funding cycle, I say that's a responsible way of doing it. Cutting off funding in February of next year, I don't think is a responsible way of doing it. But so that you know, that is kind of one option. It's sort of the hybrid model. Model 1 is leave it exactly as it is. Model 2 is cut it off, and CSC use the money that the voters said was supposed to be in addition to the money that was currently being spent. And the hybrid is sort of a use our model and
Okay. Thank you for that.
Sure.
So there's definitely more to come at the December 21st meeting, and I'm so glad that y'all are preparing for this and providing data so that we can make some sound decisions. Okay, thank you for bringing that forward. Mr. Watts, do you have any comments before we dismiss?
No comments.
No additional comments. All right, everybody. So thank you all for the conversation, the discussion today.